identify anybody who makes a motion, and identify anybody who seconds the motion, just so she makes sure she knows, who made the motion. And we should do a roll call. So let's do a roll call again, and Cynthia, you did such a good job starting us, I'll let you start again.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia Dowdy, Tamara Stoner,
Stephen Franklin.
Ree Rivera,
Margot Rain.
Kristen Zumar.
Okay, we have a quorum, so I will call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. I have 2 corrections for the minutes. On page 5, somewhere where it says everyone's, there's 2 comments, or 2 apostrophes instead of 1. And then the other one is on page 7. It says 270, but it doesn't say 270 what? I think it should say 270 days. Does anybody else have any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
With the corrections.
With the corrections.
Ree Rivera, motion to approve with corrections.
Bree, motion approved.
Kristen Zumar, second.
And Kristen has seconded, and all in favor say aye.
There's two abstentions.
Okay, so abstentions from Tamara and Stephen, and anybody else voting against that? Okay, so the minutes are approved. So discussion and possible vote and referral to city council regarding ordinance 555. Max, can I ask you to kind of run that discussion, please?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
So we had started off, as you may recall, with a meeting, with an educational meeting, and we had another meeting to figure out, look at different codes, and we started with drafts, so we've gotten to this point. There's a number of different ways that the commission could move forward today. The commission could, and I'm sure there might be some people who want to talk about individual tweaks to the ordinance. We could go through that, and then we could vote on those additional tweaks. You could say, sort of send it back with directions to sort of have me make additional changes and direct me to make those changes. Or if there's not too many changes that are made, we could do that here today, right? Like if you wanted to change, for example, 180 or 270 to 180, that's pretty easy. We could do that. We can get that.
Sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Thank you for letting me know.
Thank you.
I wasn't close enough to the mic. You could have, if you made those changes, and then you would have a vote up or down. And the vote up or down would be, yes, we want to refer this to council, or no, we don't. Right, and you could, your range of motions could be whatever you would want. So, in other words, this is really, I've kind of guided the process up until now, but this is the time that I really need to turn it over to the commission, because it's your will to determine what you want. If you like the ordinance the way it's written, you can recommend it, and there's lots of things you can do. So, if those folks have changes, I would probably start there, not vote on any particular changes, and then see where the motions take us from here.
Okay, thank you. All right, that being said, why don't we go page by page at this point?
Can I
liability insurance that has to be in licensing at all?
There is not.
I do think that needs to be addressed, that needs to be added.
Okay, so hang on a second.
I'm
Can we
just-
have a motion, can we have a motion to add a clause to deal with, to add $1 million for liability insurance?
I'll make a motion to add a clause for all categories of, short-term rentals. That would include bed and breakfast, short-term rental, and hotel, motel, and inn for $1 million of liability.
A minimum.
A minimum.
Minimum of $1 million of liability insurance.
Okay.
Do I, and Cynthia made that motion, do I have a second?
Kristen Zumar second.
Kristen second, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so I need you to add that one.
I can add that one.
Okay,
Tangential to that is a requirement then, under operational violations, of failure to show insurance. So you've got to echo it in that, section.
Which
So,
That's on page
Commissioner Batty, I was thinking about just putting it in a licensing requirement, so the city has to have it up front. Would that be sufficient?
Sure, but if they let it lapse, then it's a violation, right? Who's gonna, how's that gonna be punished?
I understand your concern. I can work that in two places.
Thank you.
Max, I have a question.
Yes.
In listening to everyone, one of the things that I had,
Can you speak into the mic, because I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, was thinking about in brief,
is the application process for wanting to have one of these type of facilities. And is there a clear path to obtain a license for one of these?
Yes.
And what happens when they apply? Is there a time frame? One of the things that I suggested was, and this is similar to one of the state entities of getting a OABCC license. If someone wants to have a Airbnb or whatever the term, they have to submit a letter to the community within X amount of feet of said property, and they would have to put in a public notice in the newspaper or weekly. This ensures that any property owner or residents has a voice to respond to that particular application. And I was asked, why would you make things difficult? And I said, it's not making things difficult. If you have a process for someone who wants to do business in a particular community for something as sensitive as this, then there should be a process to get there.
So I'm gonna answer your question in two
Okay.
different tranches, okay? The requirements for the licensing, you have to obtain a business license, a rental housing license. You have to have an inspection of the property, a life safety inspection, right? And then you have to get a separate, short-term rental license. And the requirements are set forth in 230.27.1.
okay,
So those are the requirements that are there. To your second set of questions regarding the process, right? The process to go through to get those, that would be a significant revision to the ordinance. And so what you would do is, if that's the process that you want to do, you would make a motion and see if your other commissioners support that. I will tell you, if that happens, I'll have to go back to the drafting drawing board. And I know you sent that to me, but I take direction from the commission as a whole. Does that make sense?
no, it does, but when, the reason I say that is because my ears hear, and not only hear, I listen. So there's a huge concern, about the possibility of what could be. My short-term response or knee-jerk response is, I don't think that if we look at long-term planning for the city, there's no arrangements with developers to develop the Delaware River area. We're not gonna put in a 50-slip marina. If we look at all the components that draw people to want to stay in a town for vacation purposes, fortunately for the residents who have a lot of concern about that, we don't have that. We're not attractive to college kids to come and hang out. And I don't see that being an issue moving forward unless there's some plans in the city that we don't know about. So I get it, and I feel it. I do live next to, my business is next to 2 Airbnbs. Thank God, all the people who come in and out of there are wonderful people. So I'm not gonna, belabor a conversation. I just wanted to share why I brought that up and was making mention of it.
So two points. First, if you decide to make a motion to add that or to go that route, you'd have to specify what body would hear the appeal, because if we have the Alcohol Beverage Commission is already set up to hear those alcohol ones, and you would need to, so is that gonna be the council, the board of adjustment, the planning commission, who hears that appeal? And then I have to come up with standards on which they apply,
Understood.
which I could not do here today.
No, I fully understand.
Well, my question would be, what would the outcome of that be? Could people put together an opinion that says, no, you can't do it? I mean, is that how it works in the ABC? I don't know.
Is your mic on?
Oh, I don't know.
So
It
Commissioner.
says it is now, yeah, sorry.
I can answer that. So what would happen is, if, I think it's ABC, and it doesn't have to do that. I'm not trying to mimic ABC, I just understand how that process works. If you get letters from, let's say 10 people in
It's
the community.
10%, I think.
Right, and it can be one letter signed by X number of residents. Then, if they respond within that 30-day period, then you're required to have a hearing so that they can voice their concerns about why they are opposed to this particular property being used as an Airbnb. And again, it gives the opportunity for property owners and residents alike to have a solid word. They can share their opinion and be earnest about it. Not everyone who applies for a liquor license gets one. They have to follow all the rules, and here's the thing that is the jugular. I could lose my license very quickly if I didn't follow the rules, and I'll just leave it at that. So we already have rules in place, it looks like, for Airbnbs. That's my thought, just something to chew on. I'm from the South, we say things like that.
So if you decide to make a motion to amend for that, the one thing that you would need to do is, just like I've never gotten a liquor license, but my colleague gets them, there's criteria which you have to
Right.
satisfy. So then we would have to develop what those criteria would be for the granting of the permit. In other words, you can't just, it's not a popularity contest, you have to have criteria.
So before I would say that, before I would make a motion with that, I would fall upon the graces of people who have been doing this longer than I have. And is the process of adding another meeting worth the outcome? Is it worth making another amendment for Max to go back and redo it again? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, the concern I have is what is the standard? And if the standard is what's in the law, then we're already covered. If you have a higher standard, then what would that be?
It would be, so for example, one of the things that was brought up, if you want to have an Airbnb on 4th Street, you have to present occupancy, what your plan of occupancy is, days of operation, all of the things that would go with how are you going to operate. Basically, what are your days of operation? How do you plan to handle parking? Because we're going to say 4th Street doesn't have any additional parking. And I just use 4th Street because it's right up the street. And it could be said that if you cannot provide parking for your anticipated guests, then you don't meet the criteria.
But that's already in the law.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
That's what,
I'm
that's,
talking about.
because I'm saying is the higher standard of disturbance or party house, fear, or what, because we've set actually a lot of standards in here
Okay.
that somebody has to meet. I think it's an interesting idea, I'm just wondering what other, and maybe our solicitor has some thoughts on that, but I think you have to get to a higher standard.
No,
to make that
I understand it. I just want the
worthwhile.
public to understand that we're thinking about that out loud,
Right, so,
okay? I'm gonna,
It's a good idea. I like that.
Commissioner, just to be fair, I would have to go back and research what those standards are, or additional standards would be. I tried to look, as I told you, this is a sausage making process, right? So I did my best to look at a number of different B&B ordinances, for lack of a better term. And I put in things for discussion purposes. You know, there could be any number of requirements that you could add towards that. I think that I just don't have a good list for you sitting right here, because those are the ones I thought were material. I tried to put in this ordinance. But doesn't mean that they don't exist, it just means I wasn't smart enough to think of them.
Then let's just move forward.
Put it in the back of our mind.
All right. Thank you.
Just kind of sort of following up on that thought. So somebody applies, you know, they have to present all that information, the proof of insurance, blah, blah, blah. Gets granted the license, but if the neighbors notice they're not in compliance, how do they then go about bringing it to the attention? I mean, is there a process, or do they just go to the city if there's an issue? Because I would think if somebody if you have a house that's consistently, you know, ends up with parties and whatnot, that license could be revoked, correct?
Yes, so on page 6, right? All the way at the bottom, subsection A, we talked about this the last time a little bit, right? So there's a fine that's in, right, for the first violation, and it goes if there are 3 or more subsequent violations of the same offense, right? And, or if there's 6 or more violations of one type of event during that 2-year period, the city may immediately revoke the license. So, and there was some discussion about whether or not we wanted to shorten those up, but each day is a different violation. So each day it continues, it's a different violation. So that's a pretty short string on those licenses, and it gives the city the ability to revoke the license.
Just a quick follow-up question that came to mind when you made that statement. So how would residents know what, our areas or homes are, carved out for, STRs? Where would be something on the website that, is there like a running list that will be posted, like these are the locations?
So because there's a limitation and a number in the district, the city's gonna have to keep track of those, so just let's just do a very simple example. Let's say the district has 100 potential units, right? That could be, right, and we allow 2%, so there's only 2 allowed in that district. The city's gotta keep a list of each one in each district. Whether or not that's gonna go on the website, there's no requirement in this ordinance to do that, but certainly that's available by the Freedom of Information Act.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure, like, residents are aware if this is properly being used for what its purpose for or not.
Or if
So
something's
they do
operating
have
unlicensed.
concerns like that, that can be quickly addressed.
Yeah, let's follow up on that. I like that thought, because if you don't know and somebody's noisy, then you just assume it's your neighbor, you know? So what if we said they have to be publicly listed and declared, whether they're, bed and breakfast or short-term rental? There needs to be a published list of the licenses on the website. I know Antonina wants to kill herself thinking about this.
Yeah, I don't care, it doesn't matter.
I agree with you, I think I brought that up in one of the other meetings.
Yeah.
There should be a database that's searchable
Visible, yes.
by
visible.
people in the community.
Would it be just as simple, right, by address, where a license has been
Yeah.
issued, and that would be put on the city's website?
Yes.
Exactly.
that, I can make that change without.
Because then you would also know, if you see people just coming and going from a house, they're not being operated legally also.
Yeah.
And they could be also reported.
So you would need a motion for the website addition.
Before we make a motion, I have a comment regarding, along this topic. On page 4, section C, you talk about having an interior placard
Yes.
that lists, that's visible. Excuse me. I'm wondering if there's a way to have some type of exterior placard, going back
I want to
to.
stay away from exterior placards for sign code concerns.
Okay.
Trust me, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Sorry about that, I think it's not a bad idea, it creates all kinds of other
Something
problems.
small, I mean, that need to be huge.
So the one indication is that if folks need to look at it, you guys added a requirement for a lockbox. So you would, I mean, that's sort of a telltale, it's not a sign, but it is at least an exterior.
A hint.
Yes. So you would need a motion on, the posting.
Oh, yeah, Tamara, do you wanna finish your motion?
Sure. Trying to figure out how to say it. I move that we approve an active public listing.
Add to the ordinance, an active public listing.
I would like to move that we approve,
Add.
add to
Yep.
the ordinance a clause that indicates, an active public listing on the website of the addresses of all SDRs.
Yeah, the licensed properties.
Of the licensed properties. Thank you.
Well, we, close. We currently don't have a license requirement for Airbnbs, or for bed and breakfasts.
Well, that's correct, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah,
And I thought this was limited to,
No,
I thought her motion was limited to the
well, I think,
Short-term rental.
short-term rental.
I think we, for bed and breakfasts, we also need that list. So,
Just so we're clear, when I did this, I did not go through the code to look at all the requirements for bed and breakfast. If you may recall, going backwards, talking about bed and breakfast, I wanted to define it, and there was an ambiguity in the code dealing with bed and breakfast, and we wanted to solve the ambiguity, but I did not do a comprehensive sort of code look for that. I'm fine if you wanna add in here, that I just wanna know there's a requirement, there could be requirements in the code for bed and breakfast that are not addressed. Does that make sense?
yeah, but I'm unaware of them and I'm ready to leave.
Okay, I'm just saying, I don't wanna give you the false impression that we're getting a code.
No, I get it, but, I mean, with hotel motel, I think we're in different categories, those will be obvious, but, throughout here, there are requirements for licensing of, a short-term rental, but there's no, this, ordinance is silent on, licensing or fire inspection or anything else required for a bed and breakfast, and it's certainly the sense of our, constituents, but also I think people here on the commission that they should also have a license.
Well, they have a business license.
And they have a rental license. Under the current code, a business license and a rental license.
Okay, so they have two, what additional license are you suggesting? Cynthia?
Well, it just doesn't say it here, so that's what my concern was.
But as a business, they all have to have a business license.
Can I
Is
ask,
a bed and breakfast a business?
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
can we just add, licensed bed and breakfast as the title instead of just bed and breakfast? Or just add,
I'm uncomfortable because if you would like a license requirement for the bed and breakfast sort of thing and then have it, because it's probably a little bit different, I'd be happy to draft a separate ordinance for you to do that, and I think it muddies the water vis-a-vis this ordinance because it puts too much stuff in there. If that's something the commission wants, I'd be happy to draft it.
In my long business experience, chapter 2 never happened. so I think we need to get this into one document.
Okay, well, that would be a change, which it would require me to go back a little bit more.
But if you could, if we could look at the code and see where bed and breakfasts are required to have a business license and a rental license, then I think our concern is satisfied, but I'm
Well,
just trying to look now.
Anybody that does business in the state of Delaware is required to have a business license.
So can we bifurcate the discussion? We have a motion on the table.
Yes.
Is there a second as to that motion?
This was the motion to do the database, correct?
Website.
The active listing, yes.
Kristen Zumar,
I
second.
second that.
But that's to include both, the bed and breakfast and the short-term rental, right?
That wasn't for my motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you want to.
Okay,
so
so
that's
fine,
fine.
yeah, that's fine, so it's, yep, I can do that. So,
Cynthia, the state, when you apply for a license, you have to list what you're doing. We may be able to take what that code is. So if you're applying for a rental, there's a code that goes with the state license that you have, which identifies what type of business you're running. You know, I don't know the code, but I'm a restaurant, bar. If you are a laundromat, you get a code that,
Probably an SIC code.
yes, thank you. I don't know if that would satisfy that, where they have to show their SIC code to the city to identify what they've applied with the state for.
I just did a search on bed and breakfast in city code, and I don't see any requirements for a bed and breakfast to have a license. If you guys, I'm doing it on my phone, which is about to die, so.
Well, it's pretty good, it says a tourist home, I think that's.
Well, in that case, all that language needs to be changed.
Well, that's what this ordinance
That's
is
what
gonna take
the
up.
board is doing, yes.
Then the
And
ordinance.
it won't change until the city council approves this. So we're kind of in limbo about that. But they do have to, I mean, anybody that operates a business in the state of Delaware, and also I think in the city of Newcastle, you have to have a state of Delaware business license, you have to have a city of Newcastle business license.
That's correct, yes.
So anyone who operates a bed and breakfast will have to have at least those two. And then there's an additional requirement of a rental license for a bed and breakfast?
yes, it's 14037, we were just trying to look.
Okay.
Person rents property, yes.
So that means there's 3 licenses required for somebody operating a bed and breakfast in Newcastle.
2,
Well, plus the state.
yes.
The state plus the city business license and the city rental license. Does that cover you, Cynthia?
Does that help? Yeah, no, I know, I'm just, as is typical in these kinds of things, scattering it all through the code is undesirable. So if there was any way it could be in one place, I think it would be beneficial, but, as long as it's in there, I'm okay.
Okay, so we still have a motion on the table.
Kristen and Stephen both, seconded.
Yeah, second.
Tamara's, so we need.
Correct. So we need a vote. So all in favor of the motion to have an active listing on the city website of all short-term rentals, is that correct?
And bed and breakfasts.
And bed and breakfast.
No, that wasn't
Not my
Tamara's
motion.
motion.
No, that was not Tamara's
I
motion.
thought you meant, well, I move that we amend the motion to add bed and breakfasts.
Is there a second?
I second, Kristen.
Okay, let's deal with. Yeah, let's deal with, thank you, deal with the amendment first. So I would have a vote on whether or not you wanted to amend the motion. This is all a motion, to amend the motion to include bed and breakfast.
So,
I think so do we vote on that?
well, wait a minute, I think we have to have some discussion.
You can have discussion.
If I can comment, I mean, I understand the focus for this ordinance primarily was short-term rentals and trying to provide definitions of clarity. I mean, the bed and breakfast, I think, in our case, it's just one Terry House. But I mean, it's pretty clear, and I think we're kind of getting into the weeds of going off on this tangent. I mean, I think there's value in listing, having an active database for the approved short-term rentals. But I think we're just kind of getting off into the weeds with regards to bed and breakfasts and hotels and motels and everything else.
I'm not sure under the new provisions if another bed and breakfast could even open in town.
You're thinking of the historic district, think of the whole city.
You'd still have to provide off-street parking.
Well, that's much more likely outside the historic district,
This is true.
which is why I had a lot of pushback from people outside the historic district, because they're not happy either. But I think we've created a good set of restrictions.
So, unless there's further discussion.
Does anybody else have any comments regarding adding bed and breakfast to the active listing of short-term rentals on the website?
I just wanna note that I kind of agree with Max that if we do wanna look at bed and breakfast separately, that we do that under a separate ordinance and we just move forward with the edits on this, as it stands. Because that's gonna be that's gonna drag us out even longer, and we wanna get a resolution for the residents and as well as the businesses that are involved. So I believe that we should work on making the edits to this document as it stands, and then we can do with the bed and breakfast separately as a separate ordinance, and adjust that accordingly, including your comments as well as any additional changes that we'd like to have to make it consistent with the short-term rentals as well.
I appreciate your comments, but as somebody said who was listening, take it personally, we're talking about listing for people who might have one next door to them, that there's a bed and breakfast, which might have strangers coming in and out all the time, or a short-term rental next door to them. They might have children, they might have other considerations. Put yourself in the shoes.
I'm not saying I disregard that. What I'm saying is that we can do it as a separate ordinance and look at that separately.
We have a
So that we
chance here
can
to
still
do it
have,
all at
we can
once.
still resolve it at a later date, but we should try to. work
There's
on
no
this
later
ordinance.
date, there's no later date.
Okay.
It doesn't happen that way. We have, right now, we have bed and breakfast and short-term rental together in this, update ordinance. Let's deal with them now.
Well, the bed and breakfast was just to change the term to bed and breakfast and to define it. Other than that, there are no other edits to bed and breakfast in this particular ordinance. That's why I'm suggesting that we take it to a second,
It's an entirely new piece of language.
but it's just edits mostly the definition of it and the name of it, because it was previously listed as source.
Well, we're not done fiddling with this ordinance yet. And
I know, but what I'm saying is, I think the ordinance should be, we should focus our edits on what's there currently.
I disagree with you fundamentally.
That's fine.
Thank you.
You can solve it with a vote.
Okay, do we have any more discussion on whether we're adding bed and breakfast to the proposed amendment to the ordinance,
Regarding the website.
regarding the website? Any more discussion? Okay,
So if you vote yes, then breakfast is included, and if you vote no, it's not.
okay, all in favor say yes,
Yes.
Yes.
opposed? No?
It's very disappointing.
Okay.
Yes.
So we can address the bed and breakfast.
So we just
And
given
a
ourselves a
subsequent-
new job, right? A second job right after this to do all the, legal work around the bed and breakfast. Is that what I heard us take on for our next meeting?
I don't think that's nearly as trying of an ordinance to draft.
Oh, I think if you've got people coming in and out of a house next door to you, it's just as trying.
No, I don't
I
think that
do
way.
think that since we have focused primarily on these short-term rentals, to go ahead and add bed and breakfast, which is a different category, into this would be too much. I agree we should get more definitive information regarding the current regulations around a bed and breakfast and handle that separately in a separate ordinance. But I do agree that we should handle this short-term rentals such as that are used by people like Airbnb, Vrbo, or what have you, and get this over to council as a recommendation or not recommendation, and then work on the other portion.
Okay.
So now you have a motion and a second on the table for the original website vote.
Oh, okay.
Website vote.
Thanks. So, now we need a vote on whether we want there to be a place on the city website listing short-term rentals. Is that, all in favor say aye. Opposed? That motion is carried, okay. What else, what other questions do people have?
Excuse me, there's a lot of conversation going on. Please stop your comments
Excuse me,
as the commission is in session. Thank you.
oh,
I have a question with regards to page 2. I realized, at the last, planning commission meeting, April 28th, I was not present, I was under the weather, and I think you all wanted me to share my germs, so I kind of stayed home.
we appreciated it.
But, I noticed the topic of parking still seems to be, a sticking point. And I understand that looking through the minutes that it was a consensus of the commission to go with the 1 parking space. So if my view is the minority, so be it. But I just have to kind of get it on the record because I wasn't able to do so last time. I think that the issue with the parking, on one hand, I understand the concern. I live in Newcastle as well. I live on the corner of 4th and Harmony, and I understand about parking, especially when we have events. And I also know that with the exception of very few homes on the Strand that have entrances on via 2nd Street, and maybe 1 or 2 other homes on 4th Street in the historic district, off-street parking is next to nil. And as I mentioned before, it's because of the nature of the city. So I understand the concern to one degree, but I think that it's myopic. The parking requirement essentially is a veiled way of saying no short-term rentals, because no one has parking that they can provide specifically for their residents.
The one that started all of
I'm
this.
talking, please.
Yes.
I'm talking. There is parking available, however, as I mentioned before, within the city. The parking lot that's on 2nd Street near Bull Hill Park, the parking lot on 3rd Street that's adjacent to, actually there's 2 on 3rd Street, adjacent to Battery Park. There's Delaware Street, and of course there's at the end of 4th Street. I think, just having the owner indicate where parking is available, I think that is probably a more equitable, solution. Requiring, for example, I think Terry House to have 1 parking space per guest. They can't do that.
It's exempted.
They'll be exempt, okay, great. But other than that, I understand, that we want to maintain the charm of Newcastle, Mayberry, but I think also we have to be a bit more, open if we want to maintain this charm in terms of having, tourism, which the city needs. If we, continue with this ordinance of no parking, required parking, basically you're saying there's not gonna be any short-term rentals. Ironically, the one on Packard Alley that's raising all this has the parking, so this, it's kind of ironic. But I just want to get that on the record, even though I know my opinion might not be in the majority.
Yes, you may.
So at the last meeting, I had run some numbers, and, in this packet, we had agreed at 2.5%
Right.
of units can be used for short-term rentals. I don't actually have the housing numbers. I have zoned parcels was the information given to me by district. And there are 535 zoned parcels in the historic residential district. At 2.5%, that is 13 houses.
Right.
Based on that, 13 houses, I would agree with Stephen on removing that requirement. If we're only gonna allow 13 houses to be used for rentals, and you have short-term rentals, and you're gonna require each of them to have, I don't even know how many places have off-street parking in the city, I know it's limited. but we are trying to keep the city as a close-knit community as it is, but allow some people to come in, not a whole gaggle of people, not hundreds of houses, especially in the historic district. Just to give you an idea, the historic commercial district technically wouldn't get any, because there are only 31 zoned parcels. So at 2.5%, that's not even one rental. And I think that also needs to be addressed. Either we nullify the 2.5% on the commercial, historic commercial. But, the most would be R1 would get 20, based on their number of parcels. They would get 20 rental licenses. So we're not, a total of 60, approximately 62 for the entire city, and that includes 0.45 for retail commercial, which I had just put everything in. So the maximum in the whole city, including Van Dyke Village, Buttonwood, Boothurst, Washington Park, everywhere, the total we're looking at is maybe 65 houses that could possibly be used, and at most, probably 13 in the historic area. So I would be good with what Steven suggested on that.
So, the way to do that is, if you want to.
I did grow up in Newcastle, thank you very much. I have lived here my entire life, and I was on Fourth Street.
There will be no
I did live on Fourth
participation
Street.
from the audience. The public hearing is over.
Thank you, Max.
Now, if you wanted to make that motion to amend the parking requirement, that would be to strike on page 5, section D5. Because that would take out the parking requirement. And if you wanted to raise, I'm looking at the 2.5%, if you wanted to raise that.
No, I don't want to raise that. That was my suggestion, was the 2.5%.
Okay, so the way we do this as a group, if you'd like to eliminate the parking requirement, you'd make a motion under D5 to eliminate D5 from the list.
Well,
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
I think Cynthia wanted to make.
we're gonna have a discussion.
We're gonna have a discussion after that. So we have a motion, or a second.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Discussion.
So in our last meeting, we had a resident of East Third come before the commission and talk about the issues that they were facing because there were 3 apartment buildings, houses divided into apartment buildings on East Third between Harmony and Chestnut Street, which had between 3 and 6 units in each one. Every one of those, because they didn't appear to be subject to the more recent parking requirements for apartment buildings, which are very strict, you may know, because we looked at it, we now require apartment blocks to require 2 parking places, something I opposed, by the way. We know our ordinance says 2 parking places for every rental unit in an apartment, correct? Am I correct?
I believe that's
Yeah,
correct.
I believe it's correct. So these units were made without any requirement for that, and anyone who's ever tried to drive down East Third knows that it's a huge problem. Anybody who lives there struggles to find a parking place every single day. And that stretch of street in our city is the worst one for damaged cars, ring mirrors knocked off, all that kind of stuff. If we don't do something to hold back the number of parkings that occur on the street, that problem will invade every street in the whole city. It's already bad enough. Try to drive down the Strand sometime. It's awful. And I really couldn't object to this more. And in fact, I have had conversations with others that depending, I know there are people in this room who want to have parking on site. That's been requested that we add that. That's not presently in the requirement. There are parking places all over the historic district that are off-street, which might be available to be rented for such situations. I know of one house on the Strand that has 5 parking spaces. So parking spaces are available for the intrepid business person who wants to go figure it out. Yes, it adds a cost, but, you know, go to any city and pay for parking. That's the way it works. I couldn't oppose this more. We live here, and by the way, get an event going, like the Pride thing on Sunday, forget about it. You know, 150, 200 cars in town, and you're trying to park two? Come on. I mean, I fundamentally disagree that we don't have tourism here, we got plenty of it.
I didn't say that we don't have tourism, I said that the tourism that we have is basically event-based, and for the most part, it's like
Yeah.
1 or 2 days at the most. It's not like we have long, week-long.
Nobody
I'm not
needs
saying-
week-long tourism.
We
got
have no,
plenty of
we have
people.
no, we don't have week-long events. We have day-long, maybe 2-day-long
Yeah,
events.
so try to
That's the
park for
part-
2 days.
I understand,
Yeah.
I live here as well.
So, you know, I know a couple people here who actually have to deal with this in the historic district. Trust me, it's no fun, and getting your car damaged is no fun. And these are people who are going to be making money in our residential area, and let them go figure it out. It's available if they wanna do it. I would also, if I could, put in a restriction that they could not park in our municipal parking lots because they're used by residents. Go look at them. Residents who can't park on the street now. I strongly oppose this idea.
Do I have any other discussion?
A motion before you is to strike, D5, which deals with the parking requirements for short-term rental. If you vote yes, then it will be stricken. If you vote no, then it stays just the way it is. Make sense? So yes is to strike, but no is to keep it the way it is.
All in favor of striking this motion, say yes.
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 3 to strike.
All opposed, say no.
4 no.
4.
Mistake.
Other things you want to discuss on this document?
Margaret, the 2.5% historic commercial district. We're not exempting, or is that just exempted Terry House and then? 2.5%, like I said, in historic.
But I
Commercial
think that's the
historic-
short-term rentals, the 2.5%,
That's what I'm
as
asking.
opposed to.
Terry House is not intended, and I
So,
can,
so this does not, this 2.5% does not apply to bed and breakfast, correct?
Correct. Under
So
short-
there can be no short-term rentals in historic commercial, unless they're already there.
Pretty much.
I would argue that you have one, that would take you, no more than 2, yeah, I mean, maybe 1.
We currently have how many?
I have no idea.
It's about 3 or 4.
You have at least 2, you said.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4, and some of them comply with the
Yes.
code as it exists today. And I do happen to know that a number of the people who have short-term rentals are converting them to long-term rentals because the churn is more than they want to deal with, so.
I can't imagine they're economically viable either.
Oh, I think that's part of the issue. They just want cash coming in, they don't want to deal with the human turnover.
Okay.
I went through this with a fine tooth comb, and there are many little niggly things, some having to do with language and other things. I mean, do you want to zoom through quick? Because I got a bunch of stuff on the first page and
Sure.
we could go through, but I don't, I'm talking a lot, I don't want to stop
Yeah, I
the brilliant woman sitting next to me from talking too, so,
If we can go through those quickly, because
Yeah.
it is after 8 o'clock at this point, and we have other business to do.
okay. On the short-term rental definition,
Where are you?
I'm on page 2, section 2, short-term rental. Just from a cleanup perspective, on the second sentence, or parts thereof where a tourist or guest rents sleeping or living. I thought we were striking tourists completely out of this document. You don't need tourists there. I think it clouds it, just say a guest.
Whatever you guys want.
That is my recommendation. Another topic that I think we need to consider
Well,
is,
Do we have to
We, I
have a motion?
think we have to have a motion and vote
Let's
on.
go, these are little fiddly things,
yeah,
let's do two or three of them at
let's
a
think
time.
about the,
Okay.
yeah.
Maybe we'll do it by page.
Okay, in the short-term rental definition, a house, duplex, apartment, condominium, or other residential dwelling unit or parts thereof, I recommend, that we add the notion of no more than 4 bedrooms rented to a single party. I think one of the concerns that people had, coming before us tonight was that you get a house, I mean, everyone's horror is 200 Delaware Street, or is it 400, the Bridgewater house being turned into a Airbnb.
Is that being turned into an Airbnb?
No, it's everyone's worst fear.
Oh, well, they have a lot of renovations.
Don't they just? But should that ever occur, you know,
We'll want to plan in this, because
They don't have any off-street parking.
well,
oh,
no,
they have a
there's
gigantic
no
backyard.
licenses.
They have a gigantic backyard, and they would be able to.
There's
put
no
parking
light, they
lot.
would
But
have.
there's no licenses available.
There would be no licenses available at this point.
Maybe.
Okay, so
So I just wanted to suggest that we consider adding 4 bedrooms.
is this the place to add that limitation, or is that somewhere else?
It's fine to add, yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's fine to add them wherever you guys want to. You know,
Okay.
when you make wholesale changes at the end, it becomes very difficult, like for me, like to see how it reads, because I'm trying to read it over the whole
I understand.
time, so it's hard.
But
So
we want to do it right.
I understand, yeah. So what was your addition, Commissioner?
So we wanna get rid of tourist, and you wanna limit it to 4 bedrooms, right?
Say your exact language, Commissioner.
So a house, duplex, apartment, or condominium, or other residential dwelling unit or part thereof, totaling no more than 4 bedrooms. Where a guest rents sleeping or living accommodation of less than 31 days. But this also seems to require that we clarify that it's to one renter. So it's not like the Terry House, which can rent up to 8 renters. So there's 8 or 7, 8 rooms, pardon me. But for houses that are.
I'm gonna make a friendly amendment,
Yeah,
that if you do that, don't do it in definition.
okay.
Do it in.
Somewhere else?
Well, I was gonna say, you could add a section G on page 5 that says that, right after violation and penalties. You put it in the definition, then it makes it so that, you put it in the definition, a house that had 5 bedrooms would not then be subject to the licensing requirement.
All right.
Do it in the definition. Right? So it'd be no short-term rental can contain more than 4 bedrooms.
Yeah. Our house has 7 bedrooms, so, I mean, I'm looking eagerly at this, right? All the money I'm gonna make with the short-term rental.
I can add it to section 8. So,
Okay, if you all are okay with that,
Okay.
okay.
So that's 2 changes. Okay, what else?
The last thing in general, because the parcel count is not an actual count of residential dwelling units, and that means that we have another count technically of potential.
I said that, I said I only had access to the parcel zones.
Agreed, and your contributions have been fantastic. The question though is residential dwelling unit defined somewhere else in the code? So we need a definition for residential dwelling unit. It's not here, it needs to be somewhere.
A dwelling is a structure designed or used as a living quarters for 1 or more families, not to include hotel, motel, automobile court, rooming, or boarding house, or tourist home.
So it's not any of those things. Yeah. So,
So we have a definition of a dwelling unit.
well, it says it's not a tourist house, and a tourist house is gonna be blanketly changed to short-term rental. So it's actually, the definition says you can't do a short-term rental in it.
No, it just means it's not a dwelling.
It's not a residential dwelling.
Didn't
Now
we-
I'm completely confused.
Didn't we go over this back in August? Somehow this rings a bell. We went through the same topic of defining resident.
When we were talking about
Excuse me, the
the,
defining residential unit back in August, then we talked about that auxiliary and.
yeah, the auxiliary dwelling unit,
Yeah.
Well, we have a term here, residential dwelling unit, it's not dwelling unit per se. But the definition, that Chris just read is, if you just changed tourist home to short-term rental, it would exclude it. So that's what I'm trying to understand here. The smarter people than us are gonna parse this.
I'm kind of lost on the concern.
Yeah, there's all kinds of dwellings that are defined, one family dwelling, attached dwelling, you know, you got like 1,000 definitions of dwelling. Residential dwelling, just make sure it's for residents, right, that would be your standard construction. I'm having trouble figuring out what you.
Where's the definition of it?
You have a definition of dwelling, it has to be residential.
Is residential defined also?
Well, it's called a residential dwelling, right? And there's all kinds of residential districts within the code, that's where people live.
Well, at the moment, we don't have a count of all those for some reason that we can count on. And, I just,
the
You guys
parcel,
think- tell
the
me what
parcel
it is.
searches are close. Because unless you have two dwelling units on a parcel,
on East Third, you have 3 buildings that have between 3 and 6 dwelling units on a parcel. So, no, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. See what I'm saying?
yeah, but at this point, we're talking about somebody renting a whole house for a short-term rental. Not,
I don't think that's defined.
Yeah,
You
it's
could
not
rent your
defined.
apartment.
Yeah, it's not defined that way, it is not defined as a whole
It's
house.
not yet.
oh, okay.
You could rent one of those
So-
apartments on Third Street if they were allowing that, and they had a license. I see what Cindy's saying.
Well, maybe you put your thinking cap on, Mr. Solicitor, and think about that, see if you think we need to add something there. We can move on. The bed and breakfast I was really concerned about, but I think, we've said it's owner occupied, which is.
So, I'm gonna make a suggestion,
Yeah,
and it's not gonna be a popular suggestion, but I'm gonna make it anyway. So, we've had an express term, I've had a number of additions, these are a number of changes which have been requested. And I was, and remain uncomfortable, sort of going through this, in this thing, trying to come up with a definition that you guys haven't seen, trying to sort of pick through those. So, what I'm gonna request is that we table vote on the recommendation. Cynthia, you can send me your changes or questions, and then we can add them into the next draft. I will annotate them, we'll put it on the website. I will also deal with your question of bed and breakfast. You know, I can deal with that with a separate ordinance or what have you, and we can do this all at one time. But we've gotten to the point now where we're gonna be making so many small changes that it's not an accurate reflection of it. And again, not gonna be a popular suggestion, but I need to have a relatively clean document for us to have a vote.
so that means,
You can send it to me.
we'll stop now, everybody will write down what they want, send it to you, you'll make one document.
I'll make one document, so what I'll do is I'm gonna take things that you've already voted on and approved, I'm gonna put them in. And so they'll be in there. And for all the, I'm gonna say, I don't mean to be disparaging, but the nits, right? The nits or changes.
You're a lawyer, you know how it is.
Right, I will annotate that and show where those changes are made, so accept all the red lines that'll be in there. we'll vote on it next time, because I don't know that we're gonna be there.
Then these guys don't have any opportunity to discuss or,
Can you quickly run through the rest of yours?
I can try.
You would have the opportunities, Cynthia, at the next meeting, because we don't have the ordinance in front of us, and we can discuss each one of the changes as they're redlined out.
As long as you put them in, I will be a happy girl.
I'll put them in, and then we can discuss them, and then we can either say yes or no.
I'm down with that.
Okay.
So we'll have two versions, is what you're saying? The version
Just
that
like this is
includes
red line.
and the one that, the.
I'm gonna accept all the changes in there, every bit of it, right? I'm gonna add in those two, I'm gonna highlight those, the ones you guys have already voted on, so you can say it, and then red line those ones.
There's one that I would like to discuss here, because I think it's important, and it's come up both from our commentators and also, I think it would be meritorious for us to consider it on page 4. The short-term rental license to the owner, section A, add in here, the licenses are not transferable with the sale of a property. So you can't list a property as a short-term rental and sell it as a short-term rental. So if somebody buys a property and wants to redo it again, they have to go through the process.
If somebody sells a property that's currently a long-term rental, do they still have to, the new buyer has to still apply for the license?
Correct.
Okay.
And I'm gonna argue that the owner has to apply for the license anyway, the way it's set, so if you wanna make that clarification, that's fine.
Okay.
Possibly not necessary, but fine.
Well, I think it's important because I've already heard of people selling selling homes right now on East Third for the purpose of being short-term rentals.
But they still have to obtain their own license.
They
Okay.
still, yeah.
That's fine, but licenses shouldn't be transferable and, you know.
Well, since they don't have them now, they can't transfer them.
That is true, but you.
I'll
do
add
it
that.
in the
I
crystal
think
ball.
it said, I interpreted to do that, but let's add clarifying language.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? Real quick.
Let's see. I'm working on it, Mom, I'm working on it, hang on here. Just wanna make sure, because I don't wanna just have you guys find stuff in there. Oh yes, and this is important, operation violations include, there's a list. What's not included in here is the maintenance of the property according to the zoning requirements of the particular zone. You know, we live in the historic district where this has been the main question. Properties which are being used for this might not be maintained according to the requirements of the historic area. Somebody make a shortcut, put in a plastic window instead of a wood window, do other things of that nature.
That's addressed in my view.
Yeah.
Page 5, violations of penalties. Any violation of chapter 230 or any other provisions of the city code may subject the violator to any remedy, legal or ethical available to the city.
What number are we looking at?
I'm on page 5, letter
Yeah.
F.
D, what number, I'm sorry?
Just letter
At
F.
the bottom.
F, okay. Okay, I'm satisfied. I'll send you my other stuff, it's pretty small.
Send it quickly, I'd like to get, I'm having like within the next couple of days, what I'd like to do, at least for the public, to get it up on the website as quickly as I can with my schedule. If anybody else has any changes or any nits that you want me to consider or for discussion, you may send those to me, but let's get them to me this week, because I gotta have time to get them in. And I'm not very good at formatting things, so I need a little help from some people who work with me. And I'm sorry not to allow it to go, but I just don't think it's practical.
No, I think it's good.
It's like editing a PowerPoint in a group, it's a terrible experience, I get it. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
This is just a question, is there a noise ordinance in the city?
Yes.
Like at 10 o'clock? So this does not need to be addressed because somebody had mentioned, a noise ordinance and so that,
So, yeah, that section F was written or designed.
I just wanted to
so that
verify
it
we
could
didn't have to
subject-
add anything else in here.
It subjects them to fines and, it was my catch-all, right? It subjects them to fines. But simply because you have that license doesn't mean you can violate any other provision of the code.
What is the noise, is it 11 PM or 10 PM?
Do we need to officially officially kind of defer this, or can we just move on to the next agenda item?
You don't have to have another public hearing, number one. Number two, you can just defer it to the next meeting, so a motion to defer to the next
Okay,
meeting,
okay.
consider the next draft.
So for Kristen, your question, there's, oh, sorry, thank you. There are, different provisions for different items, so radios, TVs, phonographs, and similar devices. It's the hours of 9 to 7 a.m.
What?
Yes, phonographs.
Wow.
Loading operations are prohibited between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Construction prohibited between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. And then different hours on the weekend. It's all in chapter 166.
So I'd like to make a motion to defer further discussion and vote on ordinance 555 to the July meeting. Can I have a second to that motion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Max. Okay, next on our agenda is we are required to provide a report to the state of Delaware annually, detailing how we are in compliance with our comprehensive plan. And that report is in your packet. You will notice the red is our answers. Does anybody have any questions or comments on any of those answers?
Madam Chair, just to clarify, the italics is our end. All of the italics is our answer.
Oh, all of the italics, okay. Oh, got it.
Black italics is the goal, verbatim from the comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Max.
And the
I
red,
should ask permission to leave, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I should.
Permission granted.
and the red is the status of that particular goal
Okay.
as stated in the comprehensive plan.
Got it. Comments, questions? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve this report? Stephen is making a motion that we approve this report. It will go on to the city council, but not until the July meeting. Do I have a second to that?
I'll second.
Bree has seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, third item, what's next? Public comment. So if anybody has any public comments about anything other than ordinance 555,
It's an agenda item.
then fine.
Thank you. Phil Gross, 1301 13th Street. That's gonna be short. Again, retroactive. You owe it to the city residents that anything you decide, whatever you decide, should be held accountable for the people that are already here, having a B&B, a weekend, a week, whatever. I think violations should be posted on the site as well. I think it's, again, vigilance. And to be brutally honest, and I've talked to at least 40, 45 people, this town does not need more tourists. It does not. If we had more restaurants, if we had more stores, and I'll argue with you every day on this, it's not just 2 days a week or 2 days a month that these streets are jammed. If you had more restaurants, more stores, that would justify more work. Also, one last thing to say. If there was a tax, whether it's a wage tax, a income tax, where the city, the residents, the town, everybody would benefit from the increased tourism, I'd say hallelujah. Let's have busloads of people coming in. But at this point, you can run as many statistics as you want, but the restaurants, Tony, do you need more people coming in? You can barely handle what you have.
If you know the answer to that, that's a rhetorical question. Any restaurant wants more customers.
Can you handle more people?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I should be able to get a reservation any day of the week.
On Friday and Saturday, probably not.
Okay,
But the point of your question,
okay. Having been a businessman and majoring in business and economics, I hear what you're saying. But if we were to expand the restaurants, expand the stores, retail, then I could say, bring it on. But you wanna put a dog park outside the city, keep it in the city, and then you can justify saying, we need more tourism. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Okay, last item.
Very quickly.
Mike,
I said quickly, you'll be happy.
I did, I heard you.
We had 3 items come before the hack last time. Replace boards on the front porch, 55 West 5th Street. What happened is they started the work and then they realized that they didn't go through the Historic Area Commission. And so they stopped their work and they came and did my thing, which was good. This feeds into the last comment I'm gonna make. 46 East 3rd Street, some interesting updates to the house that were approved. We did approve 55 West 5th also. 411 Harmony was declined in its current form. They were given direction and told to come back and they could have a tier 1 approval, which means they don't have to wait a month to come through. But what I wanted to mention is that over the last year, I have personally written guidance based on what you asked me to do, Madam Chairman, for people in the historic district, homeowners, people renting properties, lawyers, real estate agents, developers, and I would add to that, I haven't written this yet, but I would add to it buildings which are listed in our listing, it's not listed nationally, but in our register of important contributing buildings. Getting these through, whatever the review process is, and I'm not putting anybody on a pin here, but it has been the slowest process I've ever experienced to get something approved. And we've done it.
And is that going through hack? Because we
It's
haven't.
going through hack.
Okay, I was gonna say, because I haven't seen any of it yet.
No, I know.
Okay.
And I'm extremely disappointed that you haven't, because it's excellent work. But what that's led to is things like the Van Dyke Armory today replacing their window without going to PAC, and they should have done. And I'm gonna make an argument that they probably didn't know that they were a contributing building, they thought they were outside the historic district. But we've had many other instances of people coming before the Historic Area Commission, having found out after they bought their property that they were in the historic district, and absolutely wrecking their plans as human beings.
No, I mean, I think what you wanna do is great, and as soon as you can get it to us,
I just
we'll
want to
look
make the
at it,
point
but,
that
yeah.
we've been working on it, and for some reason, it has taken an incredibly long time, and people continue to make mistakes for which we cannot hold them accountable as a consequence. And I think that's an important point that we need to think about. That will do it for me.
Can I ask a question about that, Cynthia? If you buy a house with an HOA, you have to be legally told there's an HOA. You don't have to be legally told you have historic.
It's not spelled out nicely. I mean, maybe Antonina has a point of view on that.
Your declaration, when you purchase a house, it's in the declaration.
Should be.
But they're wrong. Real estate agents do it wrong, and I think it's because they don't know.
And that's for the resident, the homeowner, to take up with their settlement attorney then.
Yes, it's almost like just a title company and stuff like that. I mean, seriously, that's not a real solution.
But people also have to do their homework. You know they were moving to a historic area.
They were told they weren't in a historic area by their real estate agent. So they just wrote it
Well,
off.
I'd be suing the real estate agent.
Well,
Right, they should come to the source, which is the city.
fine, but we need to provide communications for them. And to that end, I got recently turned on to the idea that there's a group called the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, because there's something for everybody. And, one of the most important things they had on their website was a communications guide. How do you communicate this stuff to people who otherwise are not gonna tune in? And I've downloaded that, I'm gonna read it and see what we can learn from that and how we can improve our communications. Because I think it's on us. I don't think it's someone buying it at the very fringe of town and being told they weren't in the district and then suddenly finding out they're in after they bought it. You know, yes, they can sue people, but that's not what people do. You know, I know what lawsuits cost us a fortune.
Okay.
So anyway, more to come, but I wanna go on the record that we're trying.
Okay, great, it'd be great to have that. Okay, one last thing, we had sort of dropped our review of the comprehensive plan because of dealing with ordinance 555. We need to pick that back up. So, for July, we're gonna be looking at 3 more chapters, chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 6. So I will,
Can you email that out?
Yeah.
yes, I will, can you have Lisa email that out?
Yeah, also, if you don't have a hard copy, I know, Tony, you're to the commission.
Yeah, you,
I can get you that, just, let me know if you don't have it, or if yours is.
And see-
whatever, just let me know.
oh, you have a hard copy?
Yeah, I had that.
So you need,
Just
okay,
let me-
all right. Anything else that we need to discuss? Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Kristen, motions to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Seconds and, yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Yeah.
Opposed?